Welcome to the show Face to Face, where we discuss issues of South Asia. Today we have with us General Muniruzzaman, who is one of the leading specialists of Bangladesh on international and strategic affairs. Okay, Professor Zaman, one of the issues that we are facing now is the changing South Asia in the context of Indo-China conflict. How much do you think this is going to impact on Bangladesh? People are saying a lot of things like this may make the region unstable and Bangladesh may be affected by it. What is your position on this?
Thank you for the very relevant question. We are watching very carefully the grave developments of the Sino-Indian border conflicts or the potential for conflict. Unfortunately, a conflict that was managed since 1962 has again risen to the point of tension, which could lead to conflict over Ladakh. Therefore, the consequences of a potential Sino-Indian rivalry or conflict in the region is very dire. We also know that both India and China have close relationship with Bangladesh and most other countries in the region of South Asia. Therefore, any potential conflict between these major powers has direct consequences for Bangladesh and other countries. In the case of Bangladesh, it is even more so for the reason of our geostrategic location. Some of the most sensitive territories that will come into the fore in case of any potential conflict between these two major powers. I am particularly referring to the so-called chicken snake or the Siliguri corridor, which is extremely close to the Indian Northeast and is a vital link between India's mainland and the Indian Northeast. Analyzing the past strategic issues, it is quite well understood by everybody that in case of a conflict between these two major powers, this becomes the most sensitive territory between these conflicting parties. For any development that takes place between these two major powers in their bilateral relationship, particularly of a potential conflict. I cannot say that any rivalry between these two countries have only economic consequences. And that is something we have to watch very carefully. We also know that China is Bangladesh's largest trading partner. So any conflict between these two major powers also has direct consequences for our trade and economy. I would also like to sort of give you a sobering effect that these two major powers are not only major powers, but they are nuclear powers. Therefore, from a study of a conflict escalation, we know that any major conflict between major powers, it is sometimes very uncertain about the escalation pathway. The consequences cannot be only thought about in the conventional field, but we have to go beyond conventional analysis and also look at nuclear analysis between these two major powers. In the end, I would like to say that my analysis is that any potential tension, which is now happening, and a potential for any conflict between these two major powers have very severe consequences for all countries in South Asia, especially Bangladesh, because of our geostrategic location.
Okay, thank you. One of the points which everyone has been making is that Bangladesh remains equidistant from both China and India. Do you think that could help us cope with the situation now? That seems to be doing well for the moment. Do you think it will be enough?
It will be very important for Bangladesh to have the same principle of equidistance in our diplomatic relationship and dealing with China and India, because they're both our friends and they're both our strategic friends. India is a country that borders Bangladesh on all three sides, and China is a country which is a very close proximity. They're both rising powers, not only in the regional scale, at least in the case of China, it's not only a regional power, but it's a global power. Therefore, we have to maintain, even under these very complex circumstances.
Moving on from the impact of the Sino-India conflict, going into the conflict itself, India hasn't had a major conflict since 62. There were some problems in 67. And right now they're having what would be called much more of a media focused one. Media is full of the Indo-Chinese conflict. The Chinese response is that they don't want to take India seriously. They really are not. They're saying this even, that it's not a big power. We don't have to bother about it. Do you think that is a position you think applies to South Asia when it comes to an Indo-Chinese conflict?
In spite of what they say in public or in the press, they understand that any potential conflict between these two powers could be extremely messy. And particularly at a time when both the powers are in fast-track economic development pathways. It is extremely important for both countries to maintain peace and stability, not only for the interest of the region, but for their own interest. We all know that any conflict between major powers in the region can have devastating consequences for their own economies and for their own development planning and pathways. And it will not be in the interest of any country to venture into such kind of a potential conflict. I also know that the Chinese stated policy is not to endanger any other country in its neighborhood. It is also the Chinese stated policy not to break stability and peace in the region. China has always maintained that it does not want to get into a conflict with any country with whom it shares its borders. And as you know, that China shares borders with a number of countries, and they have been able to resolve their disputes, solve their border disputes, and in fact, even with India, they have been able to maintain this peace and stability since 1962 for very many years and decades. It is only of late that it has now come to a point of eruption. But I'm sure that the two countries' leadership will have the maturity that it is not allowed to go beyond the issues of minor border skirmishes, so that it does not involve anything about that, because anything about that can border conflict will have very negative consequences for these two countries and also for the region. We also know that both the countries have amassed a lot of their strength on the border, even under the very difficult coming winter situations and conditions. But I'm quite hopeful that they will act maturely, particularly the leadership will act maturely and not get into a situation which could result in conflict.
Thank you. One last question on this is that what triggered them after so many years of, let us say, uneasy peace to move into something like a low level but still a disturbing conflict in the region? What triggered this, would you think? Do you think it was like they were under pressure from elsewhere, or they were uneasy about this? Is it just about territory? What do you think, sir?
I think a number of reasons can be seen. It's difficult to pinpoint a particular reason or a cause for the potential tension and conflict. The Indians have been keen on regaining some space that they had lost. They are also worried about the very nature of Chinese fortification, defense fortification across the border or the line of control. So those are some of the developments that worried the Chinese. And the Chinese also got worried about certain movements of Indian troops along the border. And they had always maintained that they would not be able to compromise on not retaining the territory that they have retained for so many years and decades. So any changes of status quo along the line of control is something of a red line to the Chinese. The Chinese are also watching very carefully certain developments in the Tibet area, where the Indian side has been of late quite arrogant in their statements. And as you know, that with the aging of Dalai Lama, we are also seeing the potential for a generational change of leadership in that area. So the Chinese are very mindful of any sensitivities of those issues. So therefore, there has been equal amount of alertness and tension on both sides, which has eventually led to this kind of a very minor skirmish in the border. But I hope it should remain at that level and not go beyond that.
Okay.
But I would say that this is something that I would like your opinion on. The media on the Indian side has been rather irresponsibly behaving. They have been talking things which are completely beyond their remit of understanding and almost at times provoking their side to take some actions. So I think everybody has a stake in behaving more responsibly so that things don't go beyond control.
I couldn't agree more with you. Reading international media, including Indian media, you think like going to war is like the best thing that can happen to a country. I think media needs a little more education about the consequences of war. I think that's a major issue. And I agree
I
with you.
completely agree. I completely agree.
Okay, there was one question. We are not going to keep you too long. One was the surprising lack of support coming from South Asia for India when the conflict arose. Indians were very concerned about it, including Bangladesh. There seems to
I
be
think this is something that is.
Gee, what do you think?
I think the response from South Asian neighborhood about the tension in the border has also surprised Indian policymakers and India in particular. The Indian side probably expected that their friendly countries tension, but unfortunately, none of the countries in the South Asian neighborhood came out with any public statement that came out openly in support of India.
Well, going back to this point, when the Myanmar crisis was on, we don't see India coming out openly in support of Bangladesh either. So given that background, do you think there is a public swell of opinion that, well, if Indians are not going to look after us, we are not going to look after them?
No, I think the position here was that since both countries are close friends of Bangladesh and we have strategic stakes with both countries, so it was, I think the best option was for us to remain neutral and equidistant from both of them. And we also wanted to position ourselves as a sort of a country that would trigger peace building between all countries in the region. So therefore, we could not have taken a side, and I completely support the position that Bangladesh did not take a side.
Yeah.
Bangladesh remained neutral and equidistant in this potential area of conflict or tension, and that is a position we must maintain.
Okay. One last question on South Asia. SARC is no longer alive, technically speaking, and functionally speaking. BIMSTEC has really not taken off the way it was intended to. It was supposed to replace SARC in some ways. Do you think a regional body is needed? And do you think a new one or the old ones can be activated? Many people don't see India and Pakistan ever going back to the same table. Given that, what is your opinion?
South Asian regionalism or South Asian cooperation is in a limbo. You very rightly said about SARC, and I consider that SARC is in a sort of politically induced coma at the very moment. It is non-functional. It is not making any headway at the political level. But then we have no substitute for SARC in South Asia. BIMSTEC is not essentially or totally a South Asian cooperation body because it does not include all the South Asian countries. At the same time, it has membership from Southeast Asian region. And whatever the composition of the regional body, BIMSTEC, it has not really taken off. The headquarters of BIMSTEC is in Dhaka. We have had several interactions with them, and they also agree that they have nothing tangible to show that they're making any progress. And I really don't see any prospect in the near future that the BIMSTEC will make a major progress on their fields where they should be working. I know this was a poster child for India because the government of India wanted to sponsor this initiative because it was exclusive to certain countries in South Asia. To be more frank, it was exclusive to Pakistan, and that is what they wanted. But BIMSTEC has not really taken off. The Southeast Asian members are reluctant. There was a reluctance from Thailand to participate in many of the activities. There was even a reluctance from Nepal to participate in the Defense Cooperation Conference that was held in India. So I don't think all the partners in BIMSTEC are enthusiastic members, and I don't see the support coming from BIMSTEC members to make it really functional in the near future. But I have great hopes for SARC. We don't have a substitute for SARC. SARC was mooted by Bangladesh, and we should be taking again a second step to reboot SARC. There is no way or there's no reason that we should abandon this. And I would also like to tell you that in spite of the general impression that SARC is dead, SARC, without the summit meeting of the prime ministers or the heads of government and heads of state, is functioning fairly well at the functional level. There are several ministerial meetings and ministerial working groups that are taking place regularly. The SARC bodies, the specialized SARC functional bodies are working fairly well. So SARC, below the threshold of the heads of states and heads of government summit, is working their routine work quite functionally. All we need is the political will at the right top so that SARC becomes visibly functional again. I'm seeing some hope that the Indian Prime Minister wanted to activate SARC in the post breakout of the pandemic. And I think that he again sees some utility of SARC in regional mechanisms. So if that is a realization, then probably SARC should be rebooted again so that it becomes functional and it comes to the benefit and welfare of all countries and people in South Asia.
With that very positive comment, thank you so much. It's been very enlightening. And I think everyone calms down, cools down, and sees that the great future of South Asia is at stake, and we all need peace more than anything else. Thank you very much, General Zaman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. A pleasure.